The entire office froze the moment those reckless words left my mouth. Hundreds of glowing computer screens surrounded us. Conversations stopped in mid-sentence, and even the sound of keyboards disappeared into an eerie silence. My heart dropped so hard I thought everyone could hear it. I had just confessed something no employee should ever say to the most powerful woman in the company. I expected security to escort me out, my career to end, and my reputation to be destroyed forever. Instead, my CEO looked straight into my eyes with a sadness I had never noticed before. She smiled, a smile that carried years of loneliness, and whispered words that changed both of our lives forever. "Then pretend I am yours." Before we begin, if you believe kindness can change lives, if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. And subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. People always assume that working in a billion-dollar company means success, luxury, and happiness. They imagine shiny offices, expensive suits, and lives filled with confidence. They never see the exhaustion hidden behind polished smiles. They never notice the employees who silently skip lunch because they are sending every extra dollar home. They never realize that some of the richest buildings in the world contain the loneliest people. I was one of those invisible people. My name is Daniel Carter. I was 29 years old, an entry-level financial analyst who somehow found himself working inside one of the largest investment firms in the city. Every morning, I arrived before sunrise, carrying a backpack that had been stitched together twice because I couldn't afford another one. Every evening, I left long after the cleaning staff had begun vacuuming empty hallways. No one knew that after work I drove across town to visit my father at a rehabilitation center. A construction accident had left him unable to walk without assistance. His medical bills swallowed almost every paycheck I earned. Most of my coworkers spent weekends traveling or enjoying expensive restaurants. I spent mine comparing pharmacy prices and wondering which bill could wait another month. Still, I never complained. My father had raised me alone after my mother passed away when I was 7. He had worked double shifts for years just to keep food on our table. Watching him struggle had taught me that dignity wasn't measured by money. It was measured by sacrifice. The company's CEO was someone almost everyone feared, Victoria Harrington. Her name alone could silence an entire conference room. Business magazines called her the Iron Queen of Wall Street. Television interviews described her as brilliant, ruthless, and impossible to impress. Employees whispered stories about executives who lost million-dollar contracts because they arrived 3 minutes late to meetings. Nobody smiled when Victoria walked into a room. Everyone straightened their backs. Even senior managers became nervous around her. From a distance, she looked untouchable, perfect tailored suits, perfect posture, perfect confidence. She wasn't much older than 40, but she carried herself with the authority of someone who had spent a lifetime fighting battles nobody else could see. I rarely interacted with her. People like me didn't. Our worlds were separated by dozens of floors, private elevators, and salaries that couldn't even be compared. Then one rainy Tuesday changed everything. The elevators malfunctioned during a power interruption, forcing executives and regular employees to use the emergency stairwells. I was climbing 23 flights carrying financial reports when I noticed someone sitting alone halfway up the stairs. At first, I didn't recognize her. Without the designer office, assistants, and expensive lighting surrounding her, she looked surprisingly ordinary. She was rubbing her ankle after apparently twisting it on the stairs. It was Victoria. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I offered my hand. She hesitated before accepting it. Her grip was surprisingly warm. As we slowly climbed together, I expected awkward silence. Instead, she asked about the reports I was carrying. Most executives never asked junior employees about their work. They only cared whether deadlines were met. She listened carefully as I explained the project. She asked thoughtful questions. She even remembered my name after I introduced myself only once. When we finally reached her floor, she thanked me with genuine appreciation instead of corporate politeness. That should have been the end of it, but somehow it wasn't. Over the next several months, our paths crossed more often, sometimes in the cafeteria, Sometimes during late-night meetings when most employees had already gone home. Sometimes while both of us were staring through the enormous glass windows overlooking the sleeping city. She never treated me like someone beneath her. She asked about my father's recovery. She remembered details from conversations weeks earlier. When she learned I skipped lunch to save money, she casually arranged for catered meals to be delivered during our department meetings without ever mentioning why. She helped people quietly, almost secretly. None of it matched the ruthless image the world believed. Little by little, I realized something strange. Victoria wasn't cold, she was lonely. The higher she climbed, the fewer honest conversations people had with her. Everyone agreed with her. Everyone praised her. Nobody simply talked to her. Success had built walls around her. I became one of the few people who treated her like another human being. Not because I was brave, because I forgot who she was whenever we talked. One evening, we stayed late preparing financial projections before a major acquisition. The office had emptied hours earlier. Rain poured against the enormous windows. Lightning illuminated the skyline every few minutes. We ordered cheap takeout because every restaurant nearby had already closed. Watching the CEO eat noodles from a cardboard container felt strangely normal. For the first time, she spoke about herself. She admitted she hadn't taken a real vacation in almost 9 years. She confessed that her marriage had quietly fallen apart because her husband loved the lifestyle more than the woman. After the divorce, nobody called unless they wanted something. Investors wanted profits, journalists wanted headlines, employees wanted promotions, family members wanted money. No one simply wanted Victoria, the woman behind the title. Listening to her, I realized wealth could purchase almost everything except genuine connection. Before leaving that night, she asked why I worked so hard despite earning less than most people in the building. I told her about my father, everything. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she simply nodded with tears quietly forming in her eyes. The next morning, without telling anyone it came from her, the company expanded medical assistance benefits for employees caring for disabled parents. Human Resources announced it as part of a broader wellness initiative. Nobody connected it to our conversation. I did. That moment changed how I saw leadership forever. Weeks passed. Our conversations remained professional but increasingly personal. People began noticing. Rumors spread through the office. Some claimed I was secretly related to her. Others insisted I was feeding her confidential information. A few assumed I was manipulating her kindness. The whispers became louder. Managers watched me differently. Coworkers stopped inviting me to lunch. Jealousy grows fastest where understanding is absent. I tried creating distance. I stopped staying late. I avoided executive floors. Whenever Victoria approached, I kept conversations painfully short. She noticed immediately. One afternoon, she asked whether she had offended me. I lied. I blamed workload. She looked disappointed but accepted the explanation. For several days, neither of us spoke beyond polite greetings. Oddly enough, the silence hurt more than the rumors. Then came the company's annual charity gala. It was held inside one of the city's grandest hotels. Crystal chandeliers reflected thousands of lights across polished marble floors. Executives arrived wearing designer suits worth more than my monthly salary. I almost didn't attend. My department manager insisted every employee be present. I borrowed a suit from my cousin that fit poorly around the shoulders. Throughout the evening, I remained near the back of the ballroom, hoping nobody would notice me. Victoria stood on stage delivering an inspiring speech about responsibility, compassion, and using success to lift others. The audience applauded. Photographers crowded around her. She looked magnificent, yet somehow I recognized the loneliness hidden behind her practiced smile. After the speech, she wandered onto a quiet balcony overlooking the river. Without thinking, I followed, not because I planned to confess anything, only because she looked like someone who needed one normal conversation. The city lights shimmered across the water below. For several peaceful minutes, we simply admired the view. She thanked me for coming. I joked that free food was impossible to refuse. She laughed. It was the first genuine laugh I had ever heard from her. Then she asked a dangerous question. She wondered aloud whether people ever truly saw her anymore or whether they only saw her position. I answered honestly. I told her I still saw the woman who shared takeout during thunderstorms, the woman who quietly helped struggling employees without seeking recognition, the woman brave enough to admit she felt alone despite leading thousands. She looked at me with eyes full of vulnerability. Then she smiled. She asked whether life would have been different if circumstances had been different, if we had met somewhere ordinary, a bookstore, a coffee shop, a park, without titles, without age differences, without impossible expectations. I should have remained silent. Instead, my heart spoke before my brain could stop it. I smiled nervously and admitted that if we had been the same age, I probably would have stolen her away that very night before anyone else realized how extraordinary she truly was. The words escaped before I could take them back. Time seemed to freeze. Every instinct screamed that I had ruined everything. Then she stepped closer, not as a CEO, not as the wealthiest woman in the room, simply as Victoria. Her voice barely rose above the wind. She told me that for just one evening I should pretend she belonged to no company, no board of directors, no headlines. She asked me to pretend she was simply mine, not forever. Just long enough to remember what it felt like to be seen instead of admired. At that exact moment, neither of us noticed that someone inside the ballroom had lifted a phone toward the balcony. A single photograph, taken from the perfect angle. One image capable of destroying careers, reputations, and everything we had worked so hard to protect. By sunrise, that photograph would begin spreading through the company faster than wildfire. By Monday morning, the board of directors would demand answers. And both of us would discover that the greatest threat to our future wasn't love. It was the people determined to convince the world that kindness between two lonely souls could only be a scandal. Before the story continues, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment with the words, "Real love begins with respect." Your comments help this channel reach more people who need stories of hope, compassion, and second chances. As the first rays of morning crept across the skyline, neither Victoria nor I knew that the hardest chapter of our lives had only just begun. Sometimes destiny doesn't arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrives disguised as a mistake, a rumor, or a single photograph that forces two people to choose between fear and truth. Monday morning arrived with a silence that felt heavier than any storm. Long before I reached my desk, I could feel people staring. Conversations stopped the moment I walked past. Employees who usually greeted me suddenly looked away. Some whispered behind coffee cups. Others pretended to read emails while secretly watching every step I took. I didn't understand why until my closest coworker quietly slid his phone across my desk. On the screen was the photograph from the hotel balcony. From that single angle, it looked as if Victoria and I were sharing an intimate moment beneath the city lights. There was no context, no explanation, only a headline someone inside the company had created. CEO's secret relationship with junior employee raises serious questions. Within an hour, the entire building was buzzing. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Investors demanded answers. Business blogs spread rumors faster than facts. Every act of kindness Victoria had shown me over the previous months was suddenly twisted into evidence of favoritism. My promotions, my project assignments, even the lunches we had shared during overtime were questioned. It was astonishing how quickly people chose suspicion over truth. I was summoned to human resources before noon. The questions came one after another. Had I ever dated the CEO? Had I received financial benefits? Had she promised me promotions? Had confidential information been exchanged? I answered every question honestly. No, 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 again and again. Still, I could see doubt in their eyes. Truth rarely sounds convincing when people have already decided on the story they want to believe. Meanwhile, Victoria faced an even harsher interrogation upstairs. The board wasn't interested in whether anything inappropriate had happened. They were concerned about the company's image. Reputation mattered more than reality. Some directors openly suggested she resign before shareholders lost confidence. Late that afternoon, my department manager called me into his office. His expression carried sympathy, but also fear. He told me that until the investigation concluded, I was being suspended without pay. Those words struck harder than any insult ever could. Without income, I couldn't pay my father's rehabilitation bills. Without work, I couldn't even defend myself. As I packed the few belongings from my desk, nobody spoke. The office that once felt like the beginning of my future suddenly felt like a courtroom where I had already been judged guilty. When I reached the rehabilitation center that evening, I tried hiding everything from my father, but parents always know. He looked at me for a long moment before quietly asking whether I had done something I was ashamed of. I answered with tears in my eyes that I hadn't. He smiled. That same gentle smile he wore when I was a frightened little boy. He reminded me that losing a job was painful, but losing integrity was permanent. He told me that people could take away salaries, titles, and opportunities, but they could never steal the truth unless I surrendered it myself. Those words became the only thing keeping me together. 3 days passed. My phone remained silent. No interviews, no job offers, no message from Victoria. I assumed she had been forced to distance herself to save the company. Then on the fourth evening, someone knocked on my apartment door. Standing outside was Victoria, not wearing a designer suit, not arriving in a luxury car. She wore jeans, a simple sweater, and looked more exhausted than I had ever seen her. For several moments, neither of us spoke. She finally admitted that the board had offered her an impossible choice. Publicly deny any personal connection with me and allow me to become the scapegoat, or defend me and risk losing the company she had spent 20 years building. She had refused both options. Instead, she had demanded a full independent investigation. If they want the truth, she had reportedly told the board, they'll get all of it. She then handed me a folder. Inside were dozens of documents. Emails proving every promotion I received had been approved months before we ever became friends. Meeting records showing I had never received special treatment. Anonymous donations she had made to employee hardship funds long before I joined the company. Everything the public believed about her was incomplete. She had quietly paid for surgeries, scholarships, funeral expenses, and emergency housing for employees over the years. She simply never wanted recognition. As I turned the final page, I understood something heartbreaking. The world respected Victoria's success. Almost nobody knew her kindness. The investigation lasted 3 more weeks. Journalists camped outside company headquarters. Financial news channels debated ethics. Social media declared both of us guilty without hearing a single fact. Yet something unexpected began happening. Employees started speaking, one after another. A receptionist revealed that Victoria had secretly paid for her mother's cancer treatment. A janitor admitted the CEO had personally covered his daughter's college tuition after he suffered a stroke. A security guard shared how she had attended his son's funeral without informing the media. Then dozens became hundreds, hundreds became thousands. Stories flooded the internet, not about corruption, about compassion. For the first time, people weren't talking about the Iron Queen. They were talking about the woman behind the title. When the independent investigation finally concluded, every accusation collapsed. There had been no favoritism, no misuse of company funds. No unethical relationship, only friendship built on honesty and mutual respect. The board publicly cleared both of us. Several directors quietly resigned after evidence revealed they had leaked the balcony photograph, hoping to force Victoria out and gain control of the company. Justice had arrived. But it had come with a cost. The weeks of public humiliation had changed both of us forever. A few days later, Victoria invited every employee into the largest conference hall the company owned. The atmosphere felt completely different. Instead of standing behind a massive executive podium, she stood on the same floor as everyone else. She admitted that leadership without humanity eventually becomes loneliness. She apologized for allowing fear and hierarchy to create walls between herself and the people she served. Then she announced sweeping changes. Executive dining rooms were eliminated. Every employee, regardless of title, would eat in the same cafeteria. Mental health support expanded dramatically. Medical assistance increased. Anonymous emergency funds doubled. Managers would now be evaluated not only by profits but by how they treated people. The applause lasted nearly 10 minutes. When it finally faded, she surprised everyone once again. She invited me onto the stage. I froze. Thousands of eyes turned toward me. She thanked me, not for saving the company's reputation, but for reminding her that genuine conversations mattered more than polished speeches. She said that one honest employee had helped her rediscover the person she used to be before success convinced her she had to wear armor every day. I could barely hold back tears. Months passed. Life slowly became normal again, or at least a new version of normal. The rumors disappeared. The headlines faded. People moved on, but something lasting remained. Victoria and I continued spending time together, though carefully and openly. There were no secrets anymore. No hidden meetings. No fear. Eventually, after consulting the board and resigning from any direct authority over my department, she asked whether I would join her for dinner. Not as an employee, not as a CEO. Simply as Daniel and Victoria. The answer came without hesitation. That evening felt remarkably ordinary. No luxury, no photographers, no expensive restaurants. We ate at the same little family diner where my father used to take me after little league games. Victoria laughed harder than I had ever heard. She admitted nobody had taken her somewhere so simple in years. My father eventually met her. He thanked her not because she was wealthy, but because she had reminded his son that kindness still existed in powerful places. She hugged him before we left. He whispered something into her ear that she never repeated. Years later, after my father peacefully passed away, Victoria stood beside me through every painful moment. She never tried to erase my grief. She simply refused to let me carry it alone. That's when I finally understood what love truly looks like. It isn't grand gestures. It isn't dramatic confessions on balconies. It is choosing to remain beside someone after the applause fades and the cameras disappear. One quiet autumn afternoon, we returned to the same hotel balcony where everything had begun. The city looked exactly the same, but we were different people. I smiled and reminded her of the reckless sentence that had almost ruined both our lives. She laughed until tears filled her eyes. Then she admitted something I never expected. The moment I had joked that I would steal her if we were the same age, she hadn't heard arrogance. She had heard sincerity. For the first time in many years, someone had looked beyond her title and seen the lonely woman underneath. That was the moment she realized success had finally introduced her to someone who wanted nothing from her except her company. Sometimes life doesn't bring us the people we expect. Sometimes it brings us the people who quietly restore the parts of ourselves we thought were gone forever. Before we reach the end, please leave a comment with the words, "Kindness always wins." Your comment helps spread stories that remind people compassion is stronger than gossip. Truth is stronger than rumors, and love is stronger than fear. A year later, under a sky filled with golden evening light, surrounded by close friends, former coworkers, and the employees whose lives had been touched by Victoria's quiet generosity, I asked her to marry me. There were no reporters, no headlines, and no cameras broadcasting the moment. Only heartfelt applause from people who understood that the strongest relationships are built not on power or status, but on trust, respect, and unwavering kindness. She smiled through happy tears and said yes. As I looked into her eyes, I realized that the most unforgettable sentence of my life had never been the reckless one I spoke on that balcony. It was the quiet reply that followed. "Then pretend I am yours." For one evening, we pretended. For the rest of our lives, we never had to pretend again. If this story touched your heart, please like this video. Share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories. And let us know in the comments what lesson stayed with you the most. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need hope today.